I have been doing neighborhood watch patrols in my area for going on 6 years now. I started after a string of car break-ins on our street. Nothing violent, just smashed windows and stolen GPS units. The kind of thing that makes you feel violated, even though nobody got hurt. Our HOA put together a small volunteer group, and I signed up mostly because I was already a night owl and figured I might as well do something useful with the hours I was already awake. My route covers about a 12-block radius. I walk it twice a night usually, once around 10:30 and again around 2 a.m. I carry a flashlight, a radio that connects me directly to our local non-emergency line, and a small notebook where I log anything unusual. License plates I don't recognize, lights on in houses that are supposed to be empty, that kind of thing. For the first 2 years, nothing really happened. I logged a few suspicious vehicles, called in a domestic disturbance once, found somebody's dog wandering loose on Miller Street about a dozen times. Normal stuff. The first night anything genuinely disturbed me was a Tuesday in late October about 3 years ago. I was doing my second patrol of the night. It was around 2:15 in the morning, and the neighborhood was completely quiet, the way it only gets in those hours between 2 and 4, when even the insomniacs have finally gone to sleep. No cars moving, no porch lights, just the sound of my own footsteps on the sidewalk and the distant sound of the highway about 2 miles west. I turned the corner onto Garrison Avenue, which is the longest straight stretch of my route. About 4 blocks of identical ranch-style houses, set back from the sidewalk behind small front lawns. I had walked maybe half a block when I saw him.
A man, walking on the opposite sidewalk, heading in the same direction I was heading, moving at a steady pace. Not fast, not slow, just walking. This was not unusual in itself. People walk at night. Insomniacs, people who work late, people who just need air. I had encountered other pedestrians on my route before, and it had never bothered me. What bothered me about this man was his clothing. He was wearing a full suit, white dress shirt, dark jacket and trousers, dress shoes. At 2:15 in the morning on a residential street. I watched him for a moment, and then continued my patrol, figuring he was maybe coming home from some kind of late event, a wedding, a work function, something that explained the suit at that hour. I walked to the end of Garrison Avenue, which takes about 4 minutes at my pace, and turned right onto Crawford Street. I did my loop of Crawford and came back around to Garrison from the other end. This is a loop that takes approximately 12 minutes. When I came back onto Garrison from the north end, I saw the man again. Same side of the street, same direction, same steady pace. He had not made any progress. I stood at the corner of Garrison and Crawford, and I watched him for a full minute. He was walking. His legs were moving. His arms were swinging slightly at his sides. He was doing everything a walking person does. But he was not moving forward. I rubbed my eyes. I looked away and looked back. I crossed the street to get a better angle. The man was walking in place. Not literally. He was not doing some kind of stationary march. He was on the sidewalk, and his body was oriented forward, and he appeared to be walking normally. But his position on the block was not changing. I stood there for what felt like a very long time, but was probably only about 2 minutes. Then I did what my gut told me not to do. I called out to him. I said, "Hey," just that, "Hey." The man stopped walking. He turned his head slowly to the right. Not toward me, just to the right, like he was looking at something across the street on his side. Then he turned his head back to center, and he started walking again. Still not moving forward. I radioed the non-emergency line and described what I was seeing. The dispatcher sounded tired and told me as long as the individual was not behaving aggressively or trespassing, there was nothing she could do. I spent another 3 minutes watching him.
then, I made a decision that I have thought about many times since. I walked toward him.
I crossed Garrison Avenue and stepped onto the same sidewalk he was on and walked in his direction. At about 30 feet away, he stopped. At 20 feet, I could see that he was a man in his 60s or maybe 70s. White hair, clean-shaved. The suit was dark gray. He was standing completely still now, facing forward, and I could see his profile clearly. His eyes were open. At 15 feet, I said, "Excuse me, sir, are you all right?" He turned his head and looked directly at me. His expression was completely blank. Not frightened, not confused, not hostile, just nothing. Like a face that had forgotten what expressions were for. He held my gaze for about 3 seconds. Then he turned forward again and walked around the corner onto the side street and was gone. I followed immediately. I was maybe 10 seconds behind him. The side street was empty. He was not there. I stood on that corner for a long time that night. I walked the entire block in both directions. I checked between houses. I shone my flashlight down every driveway. Nothing. I have patrolled that route hundreds of times since that night. I have never seen him again. I logged it in my notebook like every...
I want to start by saying that I have been a neighborhood watch captain for 11 years, and I take the responsibility seriously. I know every house on my block. I know which ones are owner-occupied and which ones are rentals. I know which families have dogs. I know which elderly residents live alone and check in on them regularly. I know the cars that belong on my street, and I notice immediately when one appears that does not. The house on Delmar was a rental property. 3 bedrooms, white siding, a big oak tree in the front yard that drops leaves for about 3 months every fall. The owner was a man named Gerald who lived 2 towns over and used a property management company to handle the tenants. For about 4 months, the house sat empty between tenants. This is not unusual. Gerald is particular about who he rents to, and the management company does thorough background checks. During those 4 months, I kept an eye on the property as part of my regular patrols. Made sure nobody was getting in, made sure the lawn got mowed, normal stuff. About 6 weeks into the vacancy, I started noticing the light. It was in the back bedroom, the one that faces the side yard between the Delmar house and the Petersons next door. A faint light. Not the kind you get from a lamp or an overhead fixture. More like a phone screen or a small flashlight, moving slowly around the room.
The first time I saw it, I called Gerald's property management company immediately. They sent someone out the next morning. The property was locked and secure. No signs of entry. Nothing disturbed inside. I watched more carefully after that. The light appeared 3 more times over the next 2 weeks, always between midnight and 2 in the morning, always in that same back bedroom, always that same faint moving quality. The 4th time I saw it, I didn't call the management company. I called the police. 2 officers responded. They did a full perimeter check of the property. Found nothing. One of them climbed onto the back fence and shone his flashlight through the back bedroom window. Empty room, bare floors, no furniture, no person, no source for a light. The officer told me it was probably a reflection from passing cars. I pointed out that there was no street on that side of the house, just the Petersons' side yard and then their fence. He wrote it down in his report, and they left. The light appeared again 3 nights later. This time, I did something different. Instead of calling anyone, I went and stood directly outside the window. I pressed myself against the side of the house next to the window, and I waited. The light was moving around the room on the other side of the glass about a foot above the floor. Slow, deliberate movements,
like someone doing a very careful search of the floorboards.
I moved in front of the window and shone my flashlight directly through the glass into the room. Empty. Bare floors, white walls. Nothing. And the light was gone. I stood there with my flashlight on the empty room, and I felt something I cannot adequately describe. Not fear, exactly. More like the feeling you get when you realize you have been watched. That physical awareness of eyes on you that has no rational explanation. I took one step back from the window, and the light came back. On my side of the glass. I looked down at my feet, and there was a small circle of pale light on the ground about 6 inches from my shoe. I spun around looking for the source. There was nothing behind me. No car, no person, no flashlight. I looked back down.
I live about 15 miles outside of a small city in Georgia. The kind of area that is not quite rural, but not quite suburban either. Houses spread out on large lots, long driveways. Most properties have some acreage behind them. The neighborhood watch out here is informal. 6 of us who agreed to keep an eye out and text each other if something seems wrong. My patrol is mostly driving. The distances are too large to cover on foot. I do a loop in my truck that takes about 25 minutes, and I do it twice most nights. I started after a neighbor's barn was broken into and some equipment was stolen. Nothing major, but it woke us up to the fact that we were isolated enough that someone could do a lot of damage out here before anyone noticed. The night I am going to tell you about was a Friday in March. Cold for Georgia. One of those late winter nights where the temperature drops faster than you expect and you can see your breath. I was doing my first loop of the night, about 11 p.m. My headlights were the only lights on the road. No porch lights, no lit windows. Everyone was either in bed or had their curtains drawn against the cold. I was on the back stretch of my loop, a long, straight county road with dense tree lines on both sides and no houses for about half a mile. I had driven this stretch probably 1,000 times. About 2/3 of the way down the road, I saw something in my headlights. A child, standing in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes hard. My truck stopped about 40 feet from where the child was standing. It was a small child, maybe 4 or 5 years old from the size, wearing what looked like pajamas, light-colored, long-sleeved, standing completely still in the center of the road, facing my headlights. My first thought was obvious and immediate. A child had wandered out of one of the houses, sleepwalking maybe, or scared and confused. I put the truck in park and got out immediately. The night was very quiet. Cold. I could hear my own footsteps on the road surface. I called out, "Hey, sweetheart, are you okay? What's your name?" The child did not respond, did not move, just stood there facing my headlights. I walked toward them, slowly, hands visible, the way you approach someone who might be frightened. At about 20 feet, I noticed something that stopped me. The child was not casting a shadow. My headlights were on, bright, the kind of lights that throw long, sharp shadows behind everything they illuminate. The road behind me had shadows from every pebble. Every blade of grass at the shoulder had a shadow. The child had none. I stood there for a moment, and I will tell you that my brain did everything it could to explain this. Maybe I was wrong about the angle. Maybe the shadows were there and I just couldn't see them from where I was standing. I took 3 more steps forward. No shadow. The light went through the child or around the child or simply stopped behaving the way light behaves. And there was no shadow.
I stopped walking. The child turned its head and looked at me. Even in the headlight glare, I could see that its eyes were completely white. No iris, no pupil, just white. I do not know how long I stood there. It was not long, a few seconds maybe. Then the child turned and walked to the tree line on the right side of the road and disappeared into the trees. I got back in my truck and I sat there for about 10 minutes before I felt like I could drive. I texted the group when I got home, told them I had seen a child on the county road, asked if anyone was missing a kid. Everyone checked. Everyone accounted for. I went back out the next morning and walked the tree line where the child had disappeared. No footprints. The ground was soft from recent rain. There should have been footprints. Nothing. I still do my patrol twice a night. I still drive that stretch of county road. I drive it a little faster now.
I moved to my neighborhood in Phoenix 8 years ago and joined the watch committee almost immediately. It is a tight community, the kind of place where people actually know their neighbors and look out for each other. We have a group chat, we do quarterly meetings in someone's backyard. We take it seriously, without taking ourselves too seriously, if that makes sense. My patrol covers the eastern end of our development. About 40 houses arranged in 2 long curved streets that loop back on themselves. It takes about 30 minutes on foot, and I do it every night between 9 and 10 p.m. Early patrol compared to some members, but it works for my schedule. About 2 years ago, I found a photograph. It was sitting on the wall of the Hendersons' front yard. Their property has a low brick wall around the front garden, about 2 feet high, flat on top, the kind of thing people set things on without thinking. The photograph was sitting face up on the wall, not in a frame, just a physical print, the kind you get developed at a drugstore. It had been there long enough that the edges were slightly damp from the morning dew, but it had not rained in days. I picked it up. It was a photograph of my street, taken from somewhere on the eastern end looking west, taken at night based on the darkness and the streetlight glow. The houses were clearly recognizable. I could see my own house in the middle distance. There were people standing in front of several of the houses.
Just standing, not doing anything, not interacting, just standing in front of the houses facing the camera. There were 11 of them. I counted. I did not recognize any of them, which sounds less strange than it is, because I know every family on that street. I have knocked on every door. I have been inside most of those houses. The faces in that photograph were not faces I had ever seen before. One of the figures was standing in front of my house, standing in my driveway, facing the camera, hands at sides. I turned the photograph over. Nothing written on the back, no date stamp, no identifying marks. I took it home and I looked at it for a long time under good lighting. Clear photograph, good focus, not a printout of a low-resolution image, a real developed photograph taken with a real camera. I showed it to my husband. He didn't recognize anyone either. He asked if it could be from a previous owner of one of the houses. Old neighbors, maybe? I pointed out that the cars visible at the edges of the image were current models. This photograph was recent. I posted it in our neighborhood group chat, asking if anyone recognized the people or knew where it had come from. Nobody did. The photograph sat on my kitchen counter for about a week. I kept coming back to it, kept looking at the figure in my driveway. On the 8th day, I noticed something I had missed every time before.
There was a figure standing at my upstairs window. Not one of the 11 figures standing in front of the houses. A 12th figure. Inside my house. Standing at the window of our bedroom. Looking down at the street. My bedroom. I showed my husband immediately. He went pale. We went through every possible explanation. A reflection? A trick of the light? A smear on the print? We looked at it under a magnifying glass. It was a person. Standing at our bedroom window. Looking out. We have lived in that house for 8 years.
We have never had a break-in. The locks have never been changed because we bought the house new. We had the locks changed the next day. We installed a security system. We went through every room. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was missing. No signs that anyone had ever been inside who shouldn't have been. I still have the photograph. It is in a drawer in my kitchen. I don't look at it anymore. But I know it is there.
I have coordinated the neighborhood watch for my area of Detroit for 9 years. We cover 6 blocks, and we take shifts so that someone is always out between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. We have a radio system, simple handheld units that connect all our active volunteers on a shared channel, Channel 3. We check in every 30 minutes, name and location. Nothing fancy, but it means we always know where everyone is. The night I am going to tell you about, there were 3 of us on shift. Me on the north end, a woman named Cheryl on the south end, and a retired postal worker named Harold who covered the 2 middle blocks. We had been on shift for about 2 hours, and everything was quiet. Check-ins going normally, Harold complaining about his knee, Cheryl telling him to see a doctor. Normal radio chatter between check-ins. At 12:40 a.m., I did my regular check-in. Jerome at the corner of Ashland and 4th. All clear. Cheryl checked in immediately after. Cheryl at Montgomery and 7th. All clear. Then Harold checked in. Or something did. The voice that came over the radio after Cheryl was using Harold's unit. I know this because each of our...
I was on the radio immediately, asking Harold to confirm his location, asking if he had just checked in. The channel was silent for about 15 seconds, which felt like 15 minutes. Then Harold's actual voice came on. Harold at Maple and 5th. All clear. Sorry I'm a little late. He had not checked in before. He did not know what I was talking about when I asked him about the previous transmission. Cheryl had heard it too. She confirmed on the radio that the previous voice was not Harold's. I left my post and went home immediately. My daughter was in her room, asleep. Door locked from the inside the way she always sleeps. Fine. Safe. I went back out and we finished the shift, and none of us spoke much for the rest of the night. In the morning, I called the radio supply company and asked if there was any way another signal could have crossed our channel. They said it was technically possible, but that our channel frequency was registered and would require specific equipment to access accidentally. Accidentally. I asked what it would take to access it intentionally. They said they did not know why anyone would want to. I have thought about that transmission almost every day for the past 4 years. I have thought about the voice that used Harold's radio without Harold. I have thought about how it knew my daughter's name. I have never found an explanation. I changed my daughter's bedroom locks that same week. She asked me why. I told her it was just maintenance.
I live on a mountain road in Tennessee. The kind of road that has no name on most maps and gets its mail delivery 3 times a week when the weather permits. Our neighborhood watch is not formal. There is no HOA, no committee, just 4 families spread over about 2 miles of road who agreed after a series of strange events to keep an eye on things and check in with each other regularly. The strange events I am referring to started about 3 years ago. Small things at first. Mailboxes found open with the mail untouched but rearranged. Tire tracks on the soft shoulder of the road that did not match any vehicle belonging to the 4 families. A motion light at the Callaway place at the end of the road that kept triggering at 3 in the morning. We started doing informal patrols after the Callaways found their barn door open 2 mornings in a row. Nothing taken, nothing disturbed inside, just the door standing open when it had been closed and latched the night before. I do my patrol on foot when the weather is good, and in my truck when it is not. The road is about 1.5 miles from my driveway to the end where the Callaways live, and I walk it slowly. Usually takes about 40 minutes at a patrol pace.
About 6 months into our arrangement, I was doing a late patrol. Closer to midnight than I usually go out, but I'd been up and figured I might as well.
Halfway between my property and the Callaways, I passed the old Merritt place. The Merritts were the original family on this road, built the first house up here in the 1920s. The last Merritt died about 15 years ago, and the property has been sitting empty ever since, tied up in some kind of estate dispute that nobody has fully explained to any of us. The house is set back from the road about 100 yards behind a rusted cattle gate that has been padlocked for as long as I have lived here. That night, the cattle gate was open. Not broken open, not cut. The padlock was hanging open on the latch. Just hanging there. Open. I stood at the road and looked up the driveway toward the house. My flashlight only reached about halfway up, but what I could see in that range looked undisturbed. Overgrown grass on both sides of the old gravel drive. No fresh tire tracks. No footprints in the soft ground near the gate. I texted the group. Got no response, which was not unusual at midnight. I made a decision I probably should not have made. I walked up the driveway. The house was dark, all windows intact. The front porch was sagging on one end, but structurally still there. The front door was closed. I walked the perimeter of the house slowly, all windows locked from the inside or swollen shut with age. I came back around to the front of the house, and I was about to head back down the driveway when I heard a sound from inside. Not a creak, not a settling noise, not the kind of sound an old empty house makes on a cold night. I have been around enough old empty houses to know those sounds. This was a door closing, soft and deliberate. The specific sound of a door being pulled shut by someone who does not want to make noise. From inside a locked house. I stood on that front porch for a long time. I am not going to pretend I was not afraid, because I was genuinely afraid in a way I have not experienced very often in my life. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, moving across a wood floor above my head. Second floor, moving from what I estimated was the front of the house toward the back. I stepped off that porch and I walked back down that driveway faster than I have walked anywhere in recent memory. I called the county sheriff when I got back to the road. A deputy came out about 45 minutes later. He did a full check of the property. Locked. Secure. No signs of entry anywhere. He found no explanation for the open gate. He wrote it up as probably a vandal who lost interest. Told me to call if I saw anything else. The gate was padlocked again when I passed the next morning. Different padlock than the one that had been there before. New. Shiny. Nobody I have talked to since has claimed responsibility for putting it there. I pass the Merritt place every patrol. I have not heard footsteps again. But I do not walk up that driveway anymore. I stop at the road, I check the gate, and I keep moving. Some doors, you decide not to open twice.
The last house on my patrol route is a blue colonial on the corner of Whitmore and Elm. 3 stories, big front porch, detached garage in the back. It has belonged to the same family for as long as anyone in the neighborhood can remember. An elderly woman named Mrs. Albrecht lived there alone for the last 12 years after her husband passed. Sweet woman. Always had her porch light on when I walked past, which I always appreciated on dark nights. Mrs. Albrecht passed away 14 months ago, quietly, in her sleep. Her daughter handled the estate, and the house went on the market about 6 weeks after the funeral. It sold quickly. New family, young couple with 2 small children. They moved in on a Saturday, and by the following week they had already introduced themselves to most of the block. Good people, friendly. About 3 weeks after they moved in, the wife stopped me during my patrol. She said she needed to ask me something. She seemed embarrassed about it, in the way people get when they want to ask something that sounds irrational. She asked me if the previous owner had any family members who visited regularly.
I told her about Mrs. Albrecht, that she had one daughter who lived across the state, that as far as I knew there were no regular visitors. The wife nodded slowly. Then she asked if Mrs. Albrecht had perhaps had a sister, an elderly woman who might have a spare key. I told her I did not know of any sister. She told me that on 4 separate occasions since moving in, she had come downstairs in the morning to find the rocking chair on the front porch moving, not swinging the way it would from wind, rocking, deliberately, the way it rocks when someone is sitting in it. The first time she had seen it from the bedroom window at around 5 a.m. She had watched it rock for about 3 minutes before it stopped. No one visible in the chair. The second time her husband had seen it, also around 5 a.m. The third and fourth times she had gone downstairs and out onto the porch immediately, and the chair had been still. But both times, she said the seat felt warm. She asked me if I had ever seen anyone sitting on that porch during my patrols. I thought about it carefully before I answered. I told her the truth, that during my years of walking past that house at night, I had seen Mrs. Albrecht sitting on that porch many times, that she was a night owl, that she liked to sit out there with a cup of tea in the evenings, sometimes quite late. The wife was quiet for a moment. Then she said that was probably what she was seeing. A habit, something in the wood for years of use.
I agreed with her. I told her rocking chairs do that sometimes. Vibrations from traffic, settling porches. Simple explanations. We said goodnight, and I continued my patrol. What I did not tell her was what I had seen 3 nights before she stopped me. I had been passing the house at around 1 a.m. The porch light was off, which was normal now that Mrs. Albrecht was gone. The new family turned it off at 10. The rocking chair was moving. And seated in it, barely visible in the darkness, was the outline of a small, elderly woman, with a cup held in both hands, resting in her lap. I stopped walking. I stood on the sidewalk and I looked at the porch. The figure sat in the rocking chair and rocked slowly, and did not look at me. I stood there for about 2 minutes. Then I continued my patrol. I pass that house every night. The porch light is usually off, but some nights, not every night, I can see the chair moving from half a block away. And some nights, when I get close enough, I can see her there. She always looks peaceful, like someone who is exactly where she wants to be. I've stopped feeling frightened by it. If you have a true story you want to share, submit it to the email in the description. New horror stories every week.